Okay. Actually, I swap seats, can I? Just because I tap with my right hand, I'm going to hold this with my left. Okay, so do you have a specific memory? Can you?
Yes.
Do you want to turn a little bit, just so everyone can see? Okay, so what's the specific memory?
It's memory about shame. Well, it's about shame, but I don't know quite what it is. It was about. Do I say what it is?
If you want.
Yeah.
It's up to you.
It was about my mother staring at me in this uncomfortable way.
Mm-hmm.
And
do you remember how old you were? Start tapping more again. Okay. Karate chop, right?
Yeah.
Yep. So
it was
memory of your mum staring at you in a certain way.
Staring at me in a certain way when I was about, I guess it started, I remember when I was about 5.
Mm-hmm.
It kept going, but always.
So you had that feeling of shame when your mother
was
staring at you in a certain way and you're about 5.
Mm.
When you think of that, where do you feel that in your body?
Oh, I feel it in my chest.
Mm. And what's that feeling feel like in your chest when you imagine seeing your mum looking at you like that? Feeling that shame in your chest?
Oh, feeling fear and shame. Fear and shame and confusion.
Okay. So that fear, shame and confusion, as you tune into that now, what's it out of 10?
Oh, it's
that feeling in your chest.
Oh, it's about an 8.
About an 8?
Yeah, an 8. Mm-hmm.
Okay, and if that fear, shame in your chest had a colour and a shape, what would it be?
Oh, it would be like sort of an angry ball, orange, like fire.
Right.
Like orangey, yellowy, red fire.
Yeah, and how big's that ball?
Oh, big.
Does it fill your whole chest?
Yes, it's not round, it's sort of flames that go out into the rest of my body.
Okay, so let's just start tapping on that. So even though I've got this red, angry, orange shame in my chest.
Even though I've got this angry, orange shame in my chest.
That's like a flame.
It's like a flame.
When I remember my mother.
When I remember my mother.
Looking at me that way.
Looking at me that way.
I accept myself deeply and completely. See, we're tuning in already. Just keep going. If you can't say it, just think it in your mind. This is good.
I accept myself deeply and completely.
That's all right. Even though I've got this orange shame that fills my whole chest, when I remember my mother looking at me, even though I've got this
orange flame, ball of flame in my chest, when I remember my mother looking at me,
all this shame in my chest, I accept myself. Deeply and completely. Even though I still have all this shame in my chest.
When I
remember my mother looking at me. This orange ball of flames in my chest. All this shame. I accept myself deeply and completely. Can everyone tap at the same time, please? The same. Okay, eyebrow point. This shame in my chest. This orange flaming ball of shame in my chest. When I remember my mother looking at me that way. I was only 5. And I remember her look. All that shame in my chest. That orange flaming shame. That fills my whole chest. When I remember looking at my mother. And seeing her looking at me. Looking at me that way. I felt all that shame. All that shame that I still feel in my chest. All that orange shame in my chest.
all that orange shame in my chest.
When I remember my mother looking at me that way.
When I remember my mother looking at me in that way.
I was only 5.
I was only 5.
So take a deep breath. That's gone down a bit now, hasn't it, from, what was it, an 8?
8.
What does it feel like now when you focus on seeing your mum looking at you that way when you're only 5 and you've got that feeling in your chest?
Oh, it still feels about a 7.
Okay.
Yeah.
So is it just shame?
It's probably fear, because I didn't know what it was, what she was thinking.
Okay. So it's fear and shame.
Fear and shame.
Okay. So it's still a 7. Is there any other part of your body that you're feeling that?
No, I just feel an overwhelming. It's just like that orange flame that fills the top part of my chest.
And it's overwhelming, and it's fear, and it's shame. And you're only 5. Do you remember what was happening at the time?
No, I don't.
So it's just the way she looked at you.
It was just the way, and it was the way I interpreted the look. I was like, I'd done something, but I never knew what I'd done.
So is that feeling that I've done something wrong and I don't know what it is? Okay. So let's do some more tapping on that. Even though I've got this feeling in my chest.
Even though I've got this feeling in my chest.
It's fear and it's shame.
It's fear and it's shame.
And I feel it overwhelming in my chest.
I feel it overwhelming in my chest.
When I tune into that 5-year-old.
I tune into that 5-year-old.
Who didn't know what she'd done wrong.
Yeah, who didn't know what she'd done wrong.
All I remember is seeing that look in my mother's eyes.
All I can remember is seeing that look in my mother's eyes.
And I feel it overwhelmingly in my chest.
I'm feeling it overwhelmingly in my chest.
And even though I had that feeling trapped in my body.
And even though I've had that feeling trapped in my body.
Since I was 5.
Since I was 5.
I'm willing to look at ways of letting it go now.
I'm willing to look at ways of letting it go now.
It doesn't belong in my chest.
It doesn't belong in my chest.
And I'm willing to process it now.
I'm willing to process it now.
And I love and accept myself.
I love and accept myself.
Deeply and completely.
Deeply and completely.
This overwhelming fear and shame.
This overwhelming fear and shame.
It's been trapped in my body since I was 5.
It's been trapped in my body since I was 5.
I wonder if I can process it now.
I wonder if I can process it now.
I'm not sure if I can.
I'm not sure if I can.
But what if I can?
But what if I can?
It's been trapped there for a long time.
It's been trapped there for a long time.
And I remember looking at my mum.
I remember looking at my mum.
And seeing the way she was looking at me.
Seeing the way she was looking at me.
I was only 5.
I was only 5.
I didn't know what I'd done wrong.
I didn't know what I'd done wrong.
I've got all that fear and shame overwhelmingly in my chest.
Got all that fear and shame overwhelmingly in my chest.
I didn't know it was still trapped there.
Didn't know it was still trapped there.
I'm willing to process it now.
Willing to process it now.
I am willing to let it go now.
I'm willing to let it go now.
Even when I remember my mum's look.
Even when I remember my mum's look.
And feeling that shame.
And feeling that shame.
And that fear.
And that fear.
I don't know what I did wrong.
I don't know what I did wrong.
I'm willing to let that feeling go out of my chest.
I'm willing to let that feeling go out of my chest.
That remaining fear and shame in my chest.
That remaining fear and shame in my chest.
That remaining overwhelming feeling in my chest.
That remaining overwhelming fear in my chest.
When I see my mother look at me that way.
I see my mother look at me that way.
I'm willing to process it now.
I'm willing to process it now.
And let it go out of my body.
Let it go out of my body.
Take a deep breath. Now when you're tuning in to that 5-year-old looking at her mother and her mother looking at her with that look, has the shame and the fear and the overwhelm gone down?
Yeah, it has. It doesn't seem so
overwhelming.
No, it doesn't. No.
So what would you say that is out of 10 now?
Oh, I just went to 4.
And has it moved from the chest or is it still there?
It's lighter.
It's lighter. So is it a different colour?
It feels more transparent, as if it's not a
Not
solid
as-
mass, as if it's blending in with my body.
So it's processing. Okay. So when you focus on looking at your mother and seeing that look of her looking back at you when you're 5, there's some shame and some fear left, but it's not so overwhelming.
No.
And it's still there in your chest, but it's lighter.
Yeah.
Okay. And it's about a 4.
Mm.
Is there any other aspect that you're seeing or hearing? Can you hear her words or anything like that? Anything else?
Just the silence around
The silence.
the silence around the stair, which echoes as a loud sound to me.
Yeah.
Because there's no words in it. It's just the silence.
The silent
words.
stare.
Yes.
Okay.
Mm.
All right, so let's do some work on that. Even though I still have this memory,
Even though I still have this memory,
this silent stare of my mother,
the silent stare of my mother.
and I'm not sure what I did wrong.